Hello. I made a video pretty much along these lines not long ago, but YouTube, unfortunately, even without me monetizing it, just didn't let it be published because they misunderstood the message of the video. Um, they took me to be promoting a conspiracy theory when I was actually challenging the conspiracy theory. So it makes me think that the people at YouTube don't really bother to listen to the content of videos. They just act on impulse, or maybe they act on like on keywords or something. I don't know, but it was irritating. I could have just changed the wording of the title, and it probably would have been allowed. But yeah, basically, it was about COVID, and it was about COVID deniers. My take on that, and YouTube had this message saying, I forget the verbatim, but it was we uh, we do not allow content that's contradicting medical medically accepted information or something along those lines. Anyway, that was a bit irritating, and that could be probably a question of another video about censorship with big social media companies like YouTube. But just a disclaimer, YouTube, I'm not promoting anything here. I'm simply stating my views on where some conspiracy theories can lead. Now, um, this is obviously a contentious subject, and it covers a vast field of areas. And I couldn't cover everything I even wanted to in one video. I think that with conspiracy theories, it's obvious why people have an interest in them and why they're attracted to them. Because when you have profound events, particularly, straightforward, mundane explanation just doesn't seem to justify the magnitude of the event. There's famous ones, of course, like the Kennedy assassination conspiracy theories, the moon landing hoax conspiracy theory, Princess Diana's death, um, Marilyn Monroe's death, the sinking of the Titanic, um, Area 51 cover, the Area 51 cover up, 9/11 truthers, and most recently COVID. And those are only the better known ones. There's many more, which is don't have time to go into in one video. But um, I do understand why people go to them. Okay, I'm not totally sort of divorced from having some sympathy with that. And I've known people in my life. In fact, right now, I know someone whom I work with. I'm not going to name the guy. I don't want to get into the whole, my intention here is, I don't want to like expose anyone or humiliate anyone. It's empirical experience I've had with someone that I work closely to. Um, and I don't even want to talk about the job at the moment because it's not because it's it's top secret or anything. Just because I don't want to get into the whole realm of, oh well, this person works for this company and they're saying these things. It's just it's just my own experience. Maybe later on, if I no longer work for the company, I can say that. But at the moment, it would just be undiplomatic. That's all. Um, Also, the guy is you know. A superior of mine, and I do rely on him sometimes. So it wouldn't be very diplomatic to go to social media and say, "Oh, he's saying this and that." But suffice to say, someone I know, um, he just flatly believes that COVID is fake. Not even like it's it's not what the WHO is saying it is. He just doesn't believe it exists. And I've met others like this. And the thing is, it's these are not people with serious learning difficulties or something. These are more often than not reasonably intelligent people, who in some cases have tertiary level education background. They're not stupid people, but I do struggle to see how someone could go down that rabbit hole. And there's other people in I could think, put it this way, I mentioned that guy, I could think of about, right now, 4 or 5 people in my life that I know um, who are going down that rabbit hole. And it concerns me because I don't think it's harmless. I think it is potentially quite dangerous for certainly for mental health reasons. Because if you're in a place where you think that you're being lied to on a massive scale and everyone else is wrong, it'll be very lonely for a start. But I think that that could have some implications on an individual's mental health. So I worry from that point of view, or rather, I'm concerned from that point of view for their sake. But that's kind of matched with also frustration and why they can be so dogmatic to something that carries no basis in fact. I mean, I can look at a lot of different areas here. Actually, I had a little bit of a debate with the guy I mentioned. I didn't want to get into a big thing in the workplace, but um, he countered, conspiracy theory. The term was invented by the CIA. I think he put it to discredit people after the Kennedy assassination. But that was probably the first very high profile one. But there were conspiracy theories before 1963. So I don't really buy this idea that it's just a term invented by the CIA. Maybe they used it. Maybe they, used it to try and silence dissent. But this is the thing that annoys me about certain conspiracy theorists. They have a sort of self righteousness that they know something that the rest of us don't. And if you disagree with them in any way or you challenge their orthodoxy, then you're an ignorant sheep and you're just being misled by the big bad government. But why is it not conceivable to say, well, yeah, I accept that the CIA has a murky history and they have been involved in covert operations. That's just a matter of historical fact. And there are things that don't add up, right? So it's never been my position to just outright say a particular conspiracy theory is just utter nonsense. In the Kennedy thing, for example, there are a lot of question marks around the circumstances of that. And actually, that's now quite mainstream. Most Americans now believe that it wasn't, the Warren Commission's findings were not the conclusive facts of what happened. Um, but, a story as big as that will never be settled. Never. The same with 9/11. Because even if the absolute truth is out there and it's being reported, there will be someone else to question it, because it's just such a huge story. Um, I mean, it was one of the pivotal moments of 20th century American history, one of the biggest news events of the 20th century. I mean, I'm going back to that one because it's almost, I think, probably more than anything else, it's the template for conspiracy theories. Um, but thinking of more recent events, I do feel that there is a thin line. I should say one of the reasons I was thought about making this video now. I've just watched an Omeletto film. It's a channel that features short films, and it showed a young woman in Bristol who was a believer in the flat Earth um, idea, right? And she met a friend who was a physicist or an acquaintance, another young woman who worked at, I don't know if there's an observatory in Bristol. It's been a long time since I've been there, but who kind of offered her to go for a drink, and it was a bit of an awkward meeting in the. But she went to the observatory or the planetarium or the science museum to stick the little stickers like "You've been lied to. The Earth is flat." It's funny because it used to be not ha funny, but ironic because it used to be like a sort of cliche or flat earthers, but when you realize there is actually groups out there who really, really do believe this. Um, there was a documentary film made up by Netflix. I think I might have made a video about this actually. And there was a woman in that who's now mysteriously went silent on social media, and I suspect that she's embarrassed by the things that she was coming out with. Um, I made a video about that at the time. I forget the specifics now, but one of the things she came out with was it was going beyond flat Earth because I actually think that the flat Earth thing is relatively harmless, but more often than not there is overlap. People who believe in that more often than not will believe in other things. And she came out and questioned, she was using this language about the survivors of the Sandy Hook school shooting as crisis actors, which I think is a loathsome concept. And you get this from right wing conspiracy theorists. Their logic basically is that when there's a mass shooting, particularly in a school, there are people paid by the government to pretend to be relatives of the victims or to be survivors, just to make the gun lobby look bad. Now, if you are at that point of actually insulting victims of an atrocity, regardless of your views on guns, I would say you really, really need to take a good long look in the mirror at where your moral compass is going. Because if you've convinced yourself so much that the government is so overbearing and so deceptive that they're willing to employ actors, then it's just, to me, that is going beyond conspiracy theory. It's becoming downright callous. And I'd say the same thing for some of the 9/11 truthers when they were questioning, for example, those who died on United 93 and others. For example, I remember at the time they were questioning, we're coming out with things like, oh, why is the stewardess so calm if these terrorists have overtaken the plane? Well, um, my response was, because they are trained to be professional in those sort of circumstances. It's not proof of anything. It's not proof to say, oh, well, she's just acting. And it's downright callous when you think, in the case of Betty Ong and others, they were American heroes. They showed incredible courage in incredibly horrendous situations. So when I hear people coming out with conspiracy theories about human-made atrocities like terrorist attacks or mass shootings, to me, that isn't being a free thinker or questioning the mainstream narrative as they would put it. Maybe they see it that way, but to me, that is insulting people who've been through the experience. And there is nothing bigger than the coronavirus pandemic. 3.5 million deaths at least. The true figure is probably pushing 10 million, because a lot of countries are underreporting their true tolls, and that's known because you have healthcare systems that are not as advanced as other countries. I mean, Peru went from, I think it was 50,000 deaths, they've now updated it to 180,000 deaths. That's just in Peru. Um, so, this is a staggering event. It's not the worst pandemic ever, but it's the worst for a long time. In terms of the mortality rate, it is the worst since the 1918 pandemic. HIV/AIDS has killed more people, but over a longer period of time. A basic look at the history of pandemic, you'll see where this lies, and it's changed the world in terms of the impact it's had on business, in terms of the impact it's had on travel, on day to day everything. It's been a profound event. So that's getting back to my first point. When something is such a big event, I think people find a way to rationalize it, and they do this by sort of going to this area where they say, well, actually, it's not really about a deadly virus, it's about government control. And there's a human component to this, because if they find people, who are like minded and think the way they do, and who question the news and question the government and all the rest of it, it starts to become easy when you have that groupthink situation. But here's the thing with people who see themselves as free thinkers within that conspiracy theory realm, although they wouldn't use that term, of course. Where's their critical thinking when it comes to questioning their own narrative? Because they look for confirmation bias, right? So they will say, oh, but this shows X, Y, and Z. One of the common ones with coronavirus is, well, seasonal flu kills people every year. That's true, it does, but not on this scale. Okay, so a bad flu year in the UK, I think 2008, 2007, 8 was a bad flu year. I think that was the year. It might have been another one I'm thinking off the top of my head here. But that was about 29,000 deaths. It's a lot of people. It's not 128. 129,000 plus. You cannot tell me that 128,000 plus deaths can be comparable to just seasonal flu. Um, and when I see these people going into the streets saying COVID's a hoax, to me that's really, I haven't lost anyone to COVID, but people who have, that would be like a slap in the face. They're basically saying, what happened to your relative? It didn't exist. Or they must have died from another cause. But it's dismissing the suffering, in my opinion. Um, I mean, they might say, if they were confronted with a relative, they might say, oh, well, we're sorry for your loss, but they didn't die from COVID. You've been lied to. If you take that theory, then every nurse and doctor in the country's in on it. And I'm aware that they'll say, they always go to this thing, right? They'll say, oh, but why is this nurse being silenced? So you might get one dissident nurse who says something different. But that's a bit like, the anti-vaccine conspiracies is another one. Say, for example, you get 1,000 people who are vaccinated. I got my first jab last week. No side effect. I had a bit of pain in my arm. That was it. But anyway, let's say you have a particular vaccine and it's given to 1,000 people, right? Now, let's say, I don't know, 10 of those people die. Um, Conspiracy theorists won't say, well, 990 people were fine. No, they will focus on the 10 who died and scare people. They'll say, oh, this just proves that it's dangerous. This proves the government's trying to control population or whatever else it is they come out with. One of the common ones is Bill Gates trying to insert microchips into you. Um, I'm going to conclude here because there really is a lot to say, too much for one video, but I want to be clear, I am not outright dismissing every single idea. And I do think it is healthy to question power. I do think it is healthy to think outside the box. I've always said that. But there's a difference between thinking critically, asking questions, thinking outside the box, and just being willfully, well, frankly, stupid. If you believe that, if you want to ignore, I don't know, because I was going to say if you want to ignore science regarding the Earth being a globe, that's fine. But I think there's another problem. People who are so convinced that COVID's fake or the Earth is flat or whatever it is. Here's a problem. Someone like me being critical in this way, it won't change their mind. They'll just say I'm a shill for the government or I'm a shill for mainstream media, and I'm being a cheat. So I do think we need to be a little bit careful not to just mock people like this and just laugh at them or insult them because that won't really win arguments. But I would simply urge them, if you really are a free thinker, do you have the ability to question yourself as well? One of the go-tos I've heard is, "Oh, I used to think like everyone else. Then I learned the truth. I'd done my own research." Going to QAnon is not research. Okay, getting into obscure websites or just websites that are confirming what you already want to hear, that is not research. Research would be hearing different sources, some that are in line with your way of thinking and some that are against it. Um, I don't know. I mean, part of me isn't too concerned about this because I think most people don't go down that rabbit hole. But I think that those who do, they need to just step back a little bit. They don't have to agree with me. They don't have to even agree that you know it is what is being reported. But just step back a little bit and think: Am I just trying to vindicate myself here? I would hope that they could do that. But you get into a situation now where it is starting to affect even relationships. Um, and that's unfortunate. What you can't do is, impose your conspiracy theory onto others. When I've had this situation where people have come out with their And I know where it's going because it usually something like, especially with COVID, it's like, oh well, my opinion, it's not even real. It's a way to control us. Well, the obvious question is why right now? What's specifically unique about 2021? Um, but I don't laugh at them. I don't get angry. I don't yell at them. Although I have to say, if I'd lost someone to COVID, I might be taking a different attitude. I I'll kind of calmly talk to them, maybe ask a few questions, try and get where their way of thinking is. But I'm usually left just a little bit flabbergasted. Like, how could an otherwise intelligent person allow themselves to be so deluded by nonsense? It's a sad thing, and I think it says something about cynicism because the more social media is growing, the more mass media is growing, so have conspiracy theories. As with the internet's growing. I don't think there's an entire disconnect there. Um, I think the past there's a perception it was a more innocent time, which of course is not true. That there's always been problems in the world and in society, but there is this cynicism about conspiracy theories that you know, well, you're all being lied to, but I've done my own research and I know the truth. Well, what makes you special? Okay. Um, because there is always a flaw in their argument, but they don't want to hear it. You present them the flaw, and they'll just change the subject or they'll go on to something else. So there is a bit of stubbornness there about just thinking, well, maybe that's not true. Okay. But it's not a case of saying every single official explanation or narrative is right. I think it is healthy to question power, and I don't want to be misunderstood here. I'm not saying that there hasn't been corruption, there hasn't been cover-ups. In fact, it's the anniversary of Tiananmen Square today. Um, the Chinese government, forget the CIA, forget the American government. The Chinese government are good at cover-ups on an industrial scale. You know, but this is another curious thing about conspiracy theorists. Their whole narrative is aimed at the West. It's always about what the American and British government's doing, maybe they'll have a go at the UN or the WHO, but it's almost always aimed at Western power structures. Yet the governments that are actually very effective at covering up and who do so tend to be totalitarian single-party states. So why is QAnon not having a go at the Chinese government? You know, but I just think if you're going down that line, you have the right to freedom of conscience, right? But if you're starting to say, for example, that survivors of a mass shooting are crisis actors, can you not just stop for one damn second and think, well, if there's any possibility that this is sincere, could that not be really rubbing salt in the wound? These are people who are hurting, who have suffered, and I'm saying that it's fake. Um, could you think, okay, maybe you don't believe the World Health Organization's narrative on COVID or their official statements on COVID? I personally think the WHO was too cozy with the Chinese government. I think there's big question marks around that. And there's a lot of question marks around the origins of COVID. I think that there needs to be pressure for the Chinese to allow international investigations into this. Of course, they're getting nationalistic and defensive and arrogant. Um, we still don't know exactly how this started. So I do think it's absolutely legitimate to question that. But the sort of people I'm talking about, they're not saying we don't know how it started. They're saying it doesn't exist. Like everything over the last year and a half is just some big plot by Bill Gates or George Soros or various governments to keep us under control. But why at this time? What's special about this time? If that was their intention, why not 10 years ago? Why not do it during the H5N1 pandemic? Why did it not happen then? In the end of the day, not everything has an ulterior motive. Not everything has another layer to it. Some things really are what they are. And that's something that I think conspiracy theorists refuse to accept because they want to have the self-righteous idea that they know better. So blue isn't blue, blue is green. It's it's sad because it is a very, very cynical way to see the world, and I think they must be quite probably quite unhappy people in some ways. So I have some sympathy with them from that point of view. But my sympathy definitely wanes when they start getting callous and insulting survivors of, like I say, of atrocities. And I'll be very annoyed if YouTube censors this. They might say, "Oh well, Nathan, that proves that there's big power control." Well, I've been pretty critical of big social media networks like YouTube, so by no means am I, above scrutinizing these people. But that's not what it's about. It's about that's not the issue here. The issue is not saying that every single thing has another layer to it, because where do you draw a line? Where do you draw a line with that? To me, that's an incredibly bleak and pessimistic way of looking at the world, and I'll leave it there.